and welcome to Brighter Morning with Bhoe. We have a wonderful program this morning. We have two very, very important guests to talk about different things, but important to the development of Trinidad and Tobago. And you are looking at Brighter Morning with Bhoe, and you are listening to Brighter Morning with Bhoe on Multicultural Television and U97.5 Hot Like Pepper Multicultural Radio. Before we get on to our first guest, who is Professor Judith Gobin, I just want to quickly run over some issues that came up. This issue of the price of chicken, I think we have a general problem of prices in the country, and that is something that we'll try to probe. I think the cost for the consumer in the supermarket, in the market, in the basically in every sphere of economic activity is proving to be very demanding in terms of costs, so we need to look at that. The second thing I would like to say, based on our local situation, it has to do with the statistics and the explanation of the statistics related to the COVID deaths. We are not challenging the statistics or the connection between the number of deaths and the issue of comorbidities. But I think that there are other human issues that people are concerned about, and I think that there are also other issues that have to do with the efficiency of the health system in Trinidad and Tobago and the management of the COVID cases that people are concerned about. If I can use one example, I have an example of a young friend who passed through COVID. He was a police officer. His name was Frankie Sammy. Frankie was just over 30 years old. A young man in the prime of his life, got married about 2 or 3 years ago. He got COVID, and these are facts. I know the facts about this case. He got COVID, he did not know. He got COVID when he was called into duty because he was on leave as a police officer, and other officers were infected, so you had a difficult situation there in the police service. He did not know that he was infected, and he only went for a test maybe 3 or 4 days later after feeling the symptoms. He was not admitted into hospital. And what happened subsequently is that when he was basically finding it impossible to breathe, that he was then taken by ambulance to ICU, and he died in the ICU. So I want to warn the officials of the Ministry of Health that this is not a purely statistical matter, and that the responsibility for the health system and the management of this system falls in the direct hands and responsibility of the officials of the Ministry of Health. So let us have a more sensitive approach to the management of this even as we vaccinate. And I support the vaccination program 1,000%. I think we are doing well with that, given the collaboration of the private sector and the government. But let us not dismiss, marginalize, or find excuses or give comparisons that, in my view, are quite irrelevant to what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. This is a small country, and 1,000 deaths is a lot, all right? And the explanations that are given, I do not think are satisfactory to most people. The third issue, local issue that I want to deal with is this Carly Bay matter. This is a persistent matter, and I think that some resolution needs to be brought to this matter having to do with the fishermen there. Something is wrong with the Cali Bay situation, and something is just not right about that. And the responsiveness of the Coast Guard, not only on this matter, but on other matters, is something to, what can I say, something to explore. And we will see if we can talk more on these things later. By later, I don't mean later today. I mean later as we progress with the program. Okay? So we move now. We have our guest, Professor Judith Gobin, on the set. We have her by video, and we want to talk to her now this morning. She's a very able and capable scientist. She just received her professorship from the University of the West Indies. She is a marine scientist, and we will talk to her about her profession and what is being done in the sea around us. Trinidad and Tobago is an island. As I said, we are many islands, not just Tobago and Trinidad, but we have 5 islands off the coast of Chaguaramas. And we are surrounded by water. The entire Caribbean area is surrounded by water, and many of the countries are islands, and some of them are low-lying land masses, like Guyana, which is not an island. Guyana is as big as England, but it has a low-lying coast. And the marine environment around us is very, very important. And so we will talk to Professor Gobin about this. Good morning. Could we have Professor Gobin? Professor Gobin, welcome.
Good morning. Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Tuari, for having me this morning, even if it's very early.
Yeah, well, that's good sometimes, but you are accustomed to this when you go on your expeditions in the ocean. I'm sure you get up very early to get there. Yeah?
That's true. We tend to have different shifts, and
Yes.
we could be up from midnight to 4 o'clock and so on.
Yes, okay. So so you're accustomed to this man, and you're a professional all the way. So I want to start by congratulating you on your professorship. I know that was fairly recent, well-deserved. So let me start you by getting straight into this then. How would you describe the marine environment, including the deep sea, the deep ocean, around, first of all, Trinidad and Tobago, and then we'll talk a little bit about the region.
Sure. Well, as you know, it's my specialty. It's my area that I've been studying for the last 39 years or so. Trinidad and Tobago, like the global environment, there is still learn about. There's just so much still to be done. Globally, there are knowledge gaps, really. For example, we have almost 1 million new species that are waiting to be discovered or more. Only about 5% of the ocean floor has been mapped at the moment. And really, we don't know enough about it. And of course, by extension, that goes for Trinidad and Tobago as well. In 1978, the Institute of Marine Affairs was instituted in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm pleased to say that it really was the basis of all marine research that was carried out in Trinidad and Tobago. And it was set up by the UN, and that's really where a lot of us very young minds met, came together, and were able to do research in the marine environment. So the Institute of Marine Affairs has played a really major role in our present understanding of the marine environment in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, we are an oil and gas economy, and there has always been, from as early as 1958, there has always been drilling in the waters of Trinidad and Tobago. So the oil area and the oil and gas area, at that time, of course, just oil, that uncovered a lot of or rather provided a lot of the basic marine information. It was what was happening around the platforms, around the drilling, and really associated with the oil operations at the time. And of course, later that extended to the gas operations. Parallel with the Institute of Marine Affairs and the sort of acquisition of basic data, of course, we have a huge fisheries division in our country. And of course, the fisheries division was responsible specifically for the fisheries information. So together, both institutions, the fisheries division and the Institute of Marine Affairs, provided a lot of the very early information on what lives in our marine environment and what resources we have in the marine environment. But there was very little in terms of exploration and discovery that extended to the deep sea itself. In other words, there was no sort of baseline surveys being carried out in the deep where the oil and presently the gas operations are taking place. We're talking 3,000 to 4,000 meters below the surface of the sea. So in this area, I really must say that I'm pleased. It was, in retrospect, it was the highlight of my career to be able to accompany the world-renowned marine archaeologist, Professor Robert Ballard, and he is well known for his locating of the sunken Titanic. So it was amazing, exciting for me as within my career path to be invited on board his vessel, his exploration vessel called the EV Nautilus. And for the first time in the Caribbean, the expeditions took place in the Kikamjani area off of Grenada, which is the only active submarine volcano in the Caribbean.
Yes.
That's right. And we were also able to come into the waters of Trinidad and Tobago. So 2013-14 was, in fact, a revelation for the deep ocean for Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm really pleased to say that I was part of that expedition where we uncovered some real, what I call treasures of Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, we'll explore that in a little bit, but I want to speak to one of the issues that, came into my mind as you were speaking about fisheries and the fisheries division, the Institute of Marine Affairs and the early work, and the issue of drilling for oil and now natural gas. There's an inherent tension between being an oil and gas producing country and being a beautiful island with marine resources, including food like fish, and including the flora and fauna of the ocean, and tourism, which is an economic opportunity that the ocean provides, isn't there? And can you speak a little bit to the tension among these three issues?
Absolutely. The marine environment and the deep sea as well as we know it, as you've mentioned it, it provides a lot of resources like fish and shellfish. And of course, we know the rich biodiversity. Of course, there are also minerals that are extracted from the deep sea. We have marine genetic resources. So we're talking about resources from which, that's biological organisms, that extracts are then used in the making and sort of synthesizing of compounds in laboratories to provide for cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, and anti-cancer drugs, and so on. So that's the provisioning services that the marine and the deep ocean provides. And then, of course, we know, as we've just mentioned, it provides the fishery resource. So the oceans provide substrates and nurseries for these resources and the seafood that we love to eat. So the activities of oil and gas operations, and that's, remember, it's the drilling, it's the removal of sediment, it's agitation of the sediment. So it means that chemicals and so on, and maybe pollutants, contaminants that are in the sediment are agitated. So these, that sort of activity, physical activity, can be really detrimental to the services that I've just mentioned. So they compromise, these activities directly impact negatively on the provision of services. And at the end of the day, sustainability or sustaining of our resources and the success of sustaining our resources is about balance. It's about how far do we go in terms of these negative activities, which we know can directly impact negatively on the provision of services. At some point, the ocean is going to not be able to provide these services as comfortably and as beneficially as it does. And we know that in Trinidad and Tobago, because we know we have the data to prove that in the area, the drilling operations, of course, there's various impacts. There's the actual physical impacts, as I mentioned. There's also the, leaks you can have from chemicals as well as oil spilling. You can also, it's these components. Then, of course, you'll have changing patterns in the area that you're having all of these drill operations. And that directly affects the ability of our fishermen to go out and fish in those areas. So there's a direct effect and impact, negative, on the marine environment and also, of course, in the deep ocean on these services. And one of the key things being fisheries.
Are we doing enough to balance this and to protect and conserve? We need the oil and natural gas as an economic benefit. And people invest large sums of money in order to do the drilling that is required for oil and gas. But we also cannot destroy our oceans or beaches. And are we doing enough in terms of balance and protection? And what more can we do?
As a marine scientist, I'm going to say no, because there's always room for us doing more. There needs to be more action. Now, having said that, of course, Trinidad and Tobago, I'm very pleased to say that we actually have an environmental management authority that is responsible for the management of the environment, which of course includes the marine and the deep ocean area. At the same time, as you mentioned, we have to balance the need to keep the economy going, and we always have been an oil and gas based economy. It's a very difficult one to balance, but I think given the global situation, Trinidad and Tobago needs to begin to pay attention. The world sort of oil and gas operators, oil operators rather, have signaled the move towards cleaner energy come 2050. So Trinidad and Tobago really needs to position itself to look at alternate sources of energy. And at the same time, we will then be able to rejuvenate the marine environment. So, yes, we've got authorities, we've got legislation, we have a marine pollution legislation, we have environmental impact assessments, which are meant to be done whenever there is any oil and gas drilling activity going to take place in the marine environment. But it's still not enough. In fact, a lot of and this is my personal opinion, a lot of the environmental impact assessments that have been and continue to be carried out, I am not convinced that it directly impacts on whether the project is allowed to happen or not. In fact, it's almost like, as you would recognize, Dr. Tiwari, it's almost like outline permission that's given to an oil and gas operator while the EIA is being done. And really, I've seen very few, if any, environmental impact assessments that have stopped any activity. So I'm saying no, that we need to do more, but we have made strides in some particular areas.
Yes, so it's a process, and it's part of the process, but whether or not that process is used with enforcement powers and teeth is another matter. I want to ask you something. Has COVID had an impact on the Caribbean Sea? And if so, how?
Yes, I think we could say yes immediately and positively, and the studies are now coming in. But on the face of it, I think, and there have been reports, so even in a small area like the beach at Maracas or Manzanilla, there's been already reports that, and in rivers and streams, that it looks cleaner. There's more fish. People are seeing the water appears to be clearer, and of course, the actual physical thing of a beach area is cleaner. It's exactly what would happen in the marine, in the inshore, the intertidal, coastal, and in the deep sea area, with less traffic, and there has certainly reduced traffic during the this whole pandemic. So that reduced traffic means it translates immediately into reduced numbers of users, reduced chemicals, reduced activity, reduced runoff. Let's think about it, even in the fast food shops and so that have now only been reopened, and restaurants soon to be open for dining in. All of those activities that run out into drains, elements of it that run out into drains, grey water, some greasy, oily water that we don't like thinking about, runoff from, other areas like that were shut down, and industries. So those were stopped from getting into the marine environment. So I'm pleased to say that the Caribbean Sea had a chance to almost catch itself, as we say in local parlance.
Okay. Now, there are two things that I want to take from that. First of all, human activity, all right, has a negative effect on our ocean systems. That's the first thing. And that includes personal human activity or collective human activity, but also industrial activity. And secondly, I think I want to ask you this question. Can we work backwards from the fact that COVID has had a positive effect on our oceans and rivers, and then working backwards from that, determine how we can deal with human activity and industrial development and its polluting capacity to help conserve and protect the ocean and the rivers of Trinidad and Tobago?
Absolutely, and I'm sure most people are aware of this new talk of the blue economy, and the positive sort of economic gains of the blue economy. Well, the blue economy is not new by any means, because we as an island, we are immersed in the blue economy. A lot of our resources are from the blue economy or the sea, the marine environment. This COVID has allowed us to stop and have a rethink. I think in the scheme of things and in line with the blue economy, and I'm sure you would recall as well, Dr. Tiwari, what we call marine spatial planning, because I know you were very involved in the Chagrama's development way back when you were a minister of physical planning. If we move towards really applying the principles of marine spatial management, we would be able to, as you suggest, continue reducing the impacts. For example, all of these industries that we have located on the marine environment. Now, can we move them? Can we realign some of them? Can we make them what we call closed loop systems so that they do not continue to influence unwanted substances into the marine environment? And really, I think Trinidad and Tobago we're at the right point where we should really seriously consider applying these principles of marine spatial management. Now, bear in mind, it's going to be a bit difficult because there will be the need for some very hard decisions to make. For example, how are we going to relocate a particular, is it a marina we want to relocate? Is it a port that with gas supplies and so on? Is it a fishing depot that we will be wanting to relocate? But we need to do it as part of our macro planning for the entire coastal environment. This is the time to do it. We need to stop. Excuse me, please. We need to stop having these tiny locations, people building on the waterfront, industries popping up here and there without a macro plan. And it's really, how do we get that plan? We have them. We have lots of proposals on the table. How do we get to the stage where we can enforce and ensure that we are working towards this macro plan, which really COVID has given us time to think more carefully about what industries can we not have or can we relocate?
Okay, so COVID has given us an opportunity to learn. We now have to address the issue of macro planning, both on land and in sea and on the ocean fronts. And we also have the solutions, really, and these can also lead to economic benefits that have to do with the recognition of the blue economy as a viable option in the development of the country. So I want to thank you for that. It is something that we can engage further on. And I want to ask you a little bit, as we use that as a segue into a couple of videos. We have about 3 minutes of videos that we want to share. Thanks for sharing those with us. And I want to ask you, what is happening for you in your research? What are you working on now, and what is happening in the research field, marine research field in Trinidad and Tobago and the region? Just be very succinct about that, and then we'll go to the videos.
Sure. As I mentioned before, when I started at the Institute, I was what one would call the worm lady. I was looking at the sediments and what live in the inshore sediments. So I did my master's study on organisms that live in sediments off of Point Lisas. And it's very instructive because the impacts of the Point Lisas environment at the time, which was like 1988 or so, I was able to see the impacts because the study started in 84. So there was a good period, 84 to 88, to compare what the organisms and the diversity of organisms looked like in the sediment, because these organisms that live in sediments are not seen by us humans, but they are what drives the productivity of the ocean. So I really started off as a benthic ecologist, or looking at the organisms in the bottom living organisms rather, living in the sediments of the ocean. But I've moved it more now into the deep sea. It's an exciting area of research because it's a frontier of, it's really the last frontier that the world is moving towards. The world is moving towards, we've run out of land resources, as you know, and we're moving towards the deep ocean. So I'm working on...
There is as much unexplored territory in the oceans around us as there is in space around us. Is that true?
Absolutely, and I'm really glad you raised that. But the money spent on space research is about 100 times more what is spent on deep sea research.
Yes.
By comparison, and it's really and it you know, we see with the people.
And there's a difference between we live here and we want to
Absolutely.
go there, right?
And more importantly, we know that there are resources in the deep sea that can actually provide economic gains and to improve the lives of people. But we're not so sure about food.
Yes.
So it really is very unbalanced.
All right, so let's look at some of this deep ocean research and the Nautilus and your involvement in it, and the scientists. What can I say? A collaboration between yourself and local scientists and foreign scientists. Okay, could we see some of those videos?
In 2014, we actually got the EV Nautilus to come to Trinidad and Tobago. The EV Nautilus is an exploration vessel as opposed to an RV, which would be a research vessel. The Nautilus is captained by Professor Robert Ballard, who is a world-renowned deep-sea biologist as well as a marine archaeologist. We were also fortunate that now we had another Caribbean participant in Dr. Diva Amon and, of course, myself. It was the first time we were having two women scientists on board.
Using the remotely operated vehicles Hercules and Argus, the team explored the southeastern coast of Tobago to a depth of 2,100 meters.
I felt that there would be a good opportunity for a project that would educate our population, and not only just young children, but also young minds, young scientists, young students, as well as adults.
Curious? Good.
The most exciting discovery for us off of the Trinidad and Tobago waters was when we discovered the methane seeps. This is an area where methane is being emitted from the bottom of the sea, and it is actually frozen because of the extremely cold temperatures. So it actually looks like a snow cone mountain.
It is imperative that we pursue knowledge about the deep sea, such as those surrounding Trinidad and Tobago, to be able to create laws and policies to help protect it.
Every country, every government should allow the scientists, the means for the scientists. International cooperation, we do have the knowledge and we do have the expertise in all our countries to develop a robust scientific knowledge of the area.
The vast resources of fossil fuels are currently vital to Trinidad and Tobago's success as an energy economy. But it is important for industry to work together with scientific and conservation efforts to ensure the responsible management of this fragile ecosystem. We must protect these environments for their sake as well as ours. Deeper study can lead to breakthroughs that will provide us with new sources of medicines, foods, minerals, and energy, as well as a new understanding of the geology and biodiversity of our region. The deep seas also play a critical role in climate regulation and nutrient cycling.
My colleagues Judith Gobin and Diva Amon have been really at the forefront of deep sea studies in the Caribbean region. The new discoveries in your waters and off Grenada are only the tip of the iceberg, and that there's a lot more research to be done and a lot more discoveries to be made.
Thank you very much for sharing that video with us, and I want to thank NEHUST for the work that they have done to make these videos possible, and of course with your cooperation and help and involvement. At one time I was chairman of NEHUST, and we did a lot of good things there, and people have, and they have continued to do good work, many times unappreciated. But these things are very valuable. Let me ask you a question that sort of derives from the video. You know, we talk a lot about information and statistics and data, and we're now into big data and so on. But all of these things really emerge because of knowledge and because of scientific investigation and research. And there's a direct link between knowledge and problem solving and the creation of solutions. I mean, do we appreciate that enough in Trinidad and Tobago, or is government just a rudderless ship, and I mean any government, just a rudderless ship that proceeds with its business without using the knowledge sector, without trying to understand what is happening, and making policy and taking action and having plans? I mean, is there a problem with that?
I'm going to say yes, simply because we feel, and understand as scientists, as you've also mentioned, there is so much data and information in Trinidad and Tobago now. This, you know, revelation of the deep sea environment, for me as a scientist, was so exciting. As my colleague Lisa Levin at Scripps Oceanographic Institute, she talks about the tip of the iceberg. And I think both Dr. Diva Aman and myself, we've been trying to get this message out to various policymakers, anybody who would listen to us, to help us. We have some information. We think this is big for Trinidad and Tobago, but it's being lost like all other data on the shelf. We have done a lot of and by we I mean collectively, marine scientists in Trinidad and Tobago and researchers have done a lot of work. We have solutions. You talk to us now, we know there's the potential of these resources. When I mentioned about marine genetic resources, for example, it's a lot of the cosmetics and a lot of drugs, the anti-cancer drugs and so on, came from synthesizing extracts of marine organisms from the Caribbean. A lot of people don't realize this. There is a huge potential for this, you know, developing this industry, and it's one of the just one of the options that we are attempting to put on the table. But going further and developing these and to provide solutions is going to cost money. And we need you know, some pumping of money into these kinds of studies that we've been literally begging for since 2013 and 14. So yes, to respond to your question directly, I'm going to say that there's not enough activity that comes out of the very, very good research and the solutions that are presented. And I'm just hoping that our students at the University of the West Indies, that they will continue to ensure that these solutions are provided at some point later.
Yes, and this is probably going to be the last question that I ask you, because we are moving up to news time, which is that, well, maybe I'll try and stick to, and if you would be economical in your answer. The first thing is that if you had to pick like two things with real, genuine economic potential for Trinidad and Tobago that is derived out of the ocean that we could do now, what would they be?
So So we have uncovered all of this tremendous biodiversity. There is a lot of potential that some of these resources can actually generate these, when synthesized, these new drugs. So microbiological organisms and those extracts can be key to drug companies globally. So that would be one, the use of the biodiversity.
So we can, out of what you know now, generate something that has a global market for drug companies that comes out of the sea.
Absolutely. And we're beginning to work with some, I am, since my connections from the Nautilus and the work that's continued after. We are working on this, but we do need the support. We do need the local support. We need financing. This research is...
What kind of financing are we talking about? The billions are wasted in this country, on all kinds of things. What you're talking about, a couple $1 million?
Oh, absolutely. A couple million US dollars would do it.
Okay. So you're talking about 10 or 12 or maybe let's say 15 million TT dollars to do the research, which will be time bound, which will yield a result, and which has the economic potential for literally billions of US dollars because of the nature of the drug industry in the world system. Not so?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Would you like to talk about a second area that we might explore? Quickly.
Sure. Yes, quickly. So we can't see what's under the water. We need to get people excited about it. So we need to develop that industry where we can get people out, not this sort of Bezos and the Virgin sort of proposal, but how do we get people to enjoy the ocean and being able to see? Maybe we could have some submarine tourism. That sort of that would also be quite an attraction on top of our normal tourism of the coral reef and the sort of snorkeling and so on, because the biodiversity is immense at certain depths.
Yes. So, I mean, compared to the rest of the world, we have a tremendous asset here, which might be accessible by submarine presence. And we could link that into the tourism product and make a difference there.
Absolutely. Because people like when they go out on a yacht or a small boat, pleasure boat, they like to be able to see what's happening under the water, but we can't.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Professor Gobin, Judith. It has been really a pleasure talking to you. I am sure that a lot of people are more informed and knowledgeable about the potential of the ocean, how we can protect it, how we can sustain it, how we can conserve it, but also how we can make money from it if we are smart about the way we proceed with our business. I want to thank you for coming on the program. I hope that I'll be able to talk with you on another occasion and that you will come.
Sure.
We now proceed with Chanel Al-Suran and the 7 o'clock news. Thank you.